Let me start by welcoming everybody to this effort. Yeah, let me start by welcoming all the participants as well as my colleagues, the tutors and our colleagues in New York to this first attempt in having a live interaction. You all may not know Liwa, that is the participants, but here he is on the screen as the one that's been behind all these efforts in pulling everything together, and we continue trying to make the best of it. This is to provide an opportunity for us to listen to each other and listen to one another. The latter is more important for me because it's not for me to repeat all the things that are in the module or even in the PowerPoint, but to get you into a situation of talking amongst yourselves, some of which is already happening, listening to, reading some of the things that have been written. So we can start to today's live interactive session. Of course, today's live interactive session is using Nigeria as a case study. The whole purpose is to try and use what you have been picking up in modules 1, 2, and now you have 3, and discuss further using an additional case study to do that. In a week's time, we will be also listening to another case study. In that time, it will be Cape Verde. And the final session on the 21st of March, 2 weeks from now, will be looking at South Africa. By that time, you, quite a number of you would have been developing some expertise into using a mode of analysis which can also be or effectively a mode of operation in terms of the quadruple nexus. Of course, the quadruple nexus has been explained in all what you have. It's talking about the interlinkages of pillars, the pillars as clearly spelled out in the modules, a peace and security pillar, as opposed to the development pillar, and then the human rights pillar and the humanitarian efforts pillar. And of course, the whole idea is that when we are trying to achieve the sustainable development goals, it is not to see these pillars as silos. It is to see the extent to which they are interconnected or interlinked, and to take advantage of the interlinkages to arrive at synergistic efforts towards coordination arrangements in what we do. But very important is what you will find in the module, that it's not enough. And some of you have grasped that and have mentioned it in some of the reactions that I have received so far, that it's not enough to have the pillars and state the pillars and say that the pillars need to, some have called it political will, leadership interest in having it done. And that calls for the second part of the quadruple nexus, which is the situational foundation. The situational foundation on which you are trying to come up with designing policies and seeking to implement policies. And in that respect, there are 4 different things to focus on under the situational foundations, and that would be governance. Governance, in particular, leadership deficit, or if you like, leadership adequacy. We shouldn't always be negative about the experience on the continent of Africa, but the reality is hardly can you point out the sort of leaders that are in a position to achieve the SDGs in spite of the efforts that are being deployed. Aside from that, on governance is the endemic, maybe even pandemic status of corruption on the continent in quite a number of countries. I wouldn't say all, but maybe I can very comfortably say many, if not most, in terms of how corruption has been making it impossible to achieve several things, including the SDGs, and the need to address that. And corruption is equally linked to the problem of rule of law, which I can expatiate on. I have been positing that there is an inverse relationship between rule of law and corruption. But we can then quickly go on to the other aspects of the situational foundation, the 4 issues to be of concern with in that, and that the other one is external dynamics. Of course, I know that I worked for the United Nations, and United Nations civil servants hardly want to talk about the problem of external dynamics. Of course, they do talk about terrorism, which is part of the problem of external dynamics, but the problem of destabilization on the continent as a result of the conflicting interests of the so-called donor countries and the development of Africa. Mark you, I'm not saying that the donor countries are responsible for the underdevelopment of Africa. The leadership in Africa should, like China did, find a way to deal with this kind of problems. We always throw up our hands, but there is that problem of active external dynamics. In some cases, you have countries that continue to treat the territories they colonized as still their colonies, even till today. But nobody wants to talk about it, but we are all saying, okay, Africans are not moving fast enough on the SDGs and the rest of it and what have you. This is a problem not limited to Africa, but just bringing it up. Institutions, there is not much that we can do except we're able to have viable institutions supporting in the efforts to get things done. If anything, institutions have been very much lacking on the continent. Of course, there is a question of resources. Resources is of import for many countries on the continent. Some don't have the problem of resources as others. If you look at a country like Nigeria, for instance, it is blessed in terms of resources. Many countries that are doing extraordinarily fine in the world don't have the kind of resources that Nigeria has, but then you have to deal with the problem of leadership deficit. You have to deal with the problem of corruption. You have to deal with the problem of external dynamics. It's not by accident that Nigeria, since independence, has always been after having leadership that are unable to perform. In the main, you've had cases that, but we'll come back to, or we can come back to all that later. I'm just saying that even in Nigeria, in spite of all the resources, external dynamics must be considered. These issues of the situational foundation are long-term issues, and we must factor them and start doing something about them as opposed to just keeping quiet and wishing them away as if they don't matter. That is the problem. Aid implementers, whether the UN agencies or whatever, always operate as if these things don't count. That once you tell them that they must not operate in silos, and then everything else will fall in place. With that background, I can go on to using the case of Nigeria to try to illustrate. Of course, Liwa yeah, it's going to be a bit difficult. That I'm thinking of whether to also have the right to share, because I want to move beyond these as at now. The next slide, please. Yep. Now, this slide, I'm going to avoid reading the slide. I'm going to try to speak to the slide. But all it is talking about here is trying to bring up the fact that Nigeria is facing a variegated number of conflicts, and you must be reading about them wherever your country is on the globe. Boko Haram has made the country very popular. A group of terrorists who have franchise relationship with the ISIS. There are other terrorists, or euphemistically called bandits, that are not necessarily aligned with this. We have the problem of ethnic militia ready to do battle on quite a number of factors all the time. Herders and farmers, many lives have been lost on this question on these problems. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, this slide still continues in describing the nature of the Nigerian situation. We can go to the next one. And they're talking about the NEXUS approach, which I have spoken about at length. Took some time to clarify what we have in mind when we're talking about the NEXUS approach, and trying to look at these with respect to Nigeria. Next slide. Yeah, some efforts that have been looking at NEXUS thinking, which you should be very much familiar with by now. We can go to the next slide. Well, still repeating the fact of various forms of insecurity in all parts of the country, and situations even in which some parts of the country are actually asking to be out of the country, secession cries, which are also destabilizing. And then came the pandemic, that as a natural disaster that Nigeria was unable to respond to. Okay, one feels, as a Nigerian, feels thoroughly disappointed that a country like Cuba was making its own effort to try to react to these problems, bearing in mind that Cuba has been under United States economic embargo. since the late 50s, 58 or thereabout, up till today, and they could try to deal with some of their own problems. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Now, I took a look at the national security, Nigeria's national security strategy. There is a document to that effect, which document specifies that its mission is to apply all elements of national power to ensure physical security and human and physical security, a just society, peaceful coexistence, national unity, prosperity, sustainable development, while promoting Nigeria's influence in regional, continental, and global affairs. Of course, from what I have said so far, you would realize that this is as good as being put out there, but the reality is that it's not happening. Insecurity, that is the order of the day. Of course, it's not the totality. There are places where life continues a little bit comfortably, but again, when you look at several indices, including poverty, I think, I don't know whether it was Ban Ki-moon that called Nigeria the poverty capital of the world. Of course, Nigeria will probably not be the poorest country in the world, but it's been going down in terms of its drives towards prosperity, in spite of MDGs and SDGs, and the fact that UN agencies normally tell you that almost like everything is working perfectly. Next slide, please. Drivers of insecurity and limitations to progress on the pillars. Here we're trying to make a linkage that we must pay attention to the situational foundation that I had spoken about a little earlier. Next slide, please. Okay, I listing some of those background problems that I had also pointed out. Boko Haram, Islamic State, West African province, ISIS, North Africa into Sub-Saharan Africa, including Nigeria. Terrorism requires complex joint collaboration with neighboring states, but a number of challenges in realizing that. Criminal activities of bandits, poverty, illiteracy, unemployment, and other socioeconomic factors, particularly in the Northwest zone and the Northeast, have continued to fuel crimes. Next slide, please. And so there is also the problem of organized crimes, which is not a problem limited to Nigeria. The UN Office for West Africa and the Sahel has clearly shown the pattern of the movement of illicit drugs, small arms and light weapons all around Nigeria, from Senegal through to the Red Sea via Sudan. But more importantly, have been the destruction of the structure of Libya, which has been impossible for those who destroyed it to put back together since that was done under Obama. And quite a lot of weapons have since moved from Libya into different parts of Central and West Africa. And one of the countries definitely destabilized by that has been Nigeria. Of course, traditional cattle rustling problems have become major problems because as my president was saying one time, oh, cattle herders only use sticks to drive danger away from the animals, but that's not the case anymore. They are carrying AK-47, and when it is very serious, you even see them carrying rocket-propelled grenades to deal with the problems they also think they face. Next slides, please. Poverty and unemployment creates wider inequalities, a recipe for criminality of all sorts. Nigeria has been ranked top on the list of countries with the most poverty-stricken people. Key development indicators such as life expectancy, human development index, corruption perception index, SDGs ratings, terrorism index, fragility index, infant mortality rate, ease of doing business shows the deplorable state of affairs in Nigeria. Next slide, please. Corruption has assumed an endemic. I was suggesting that maybe we should even be thinking of it as a pandemic, eating deeply into every facet and fabric of the Nigerian society. But the scale and consequences of corruption amongst political leaders affect the lives of many more people. Corruption deprives people rights to good living, freedom from suffering, and freedom to a lot of opportunities that will lead to utmost freedom. I mean, the concept of utmost freedom I handled in passing is an ideal that I am suggesting should be considered. That is, we go beyond Kofi Annan's in larger freedom to be talking about utmost freedom. And even though it's an ideal, a peak of SDGs that can be likened to paradise on earth, that if you can achieve all the freedoms that are expected from implementing the SDGs thoroughly, and you are towards 100% of the SDGs, then you would be going towards paradise on earth. And that would be different from the preaching that people normally give us that, oh, wait till you get to heaven and you will have paradise in place. Nobody has gone and come back, but these religious leaders support African leaders to pacify people on the need to do nothing and be waiting for their own paradise when they meet God. But it's possible to push towards the achievement via getting at least all the things that have been put together as SDGs. Of course, if new things come, because I don't want to belabor the fact that change is constantly taking place. We had MDGs before, and then we realized that MDGs could be further bolstered by SDGs based on our knowledge. In 2015, when SDGs were put in place and aiming at 2030, we can at least say that it's possible to use the SDGs as a yardstick to measure the possibility of realizing paradise on earth. Of course, that goes very far because we also have to factor in the external dynamics for African countries in all that. The war in the Russian-Ukraine war is going to destabilize all of us, including the countries that are very remote because a lot of inflation would follow, and would be a problem. But okay, let's go to the next slide, please. This is just trying to look at external dynamics with respect to Nigeria. I'm glad that the Africans were being told that they should stop talking about colonialism. It's come and gone. It's 60 years ago, not so fast. I'm glad that Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, still brought the issue back recently, that we cannot throw away those histories and their impacts that continue to measure up in the lives of people, whether they like it or not, the kind of problems they continue to face. And there are scholars, both from the West and the East and Africans themselves, who point out the fact that, yes, we may no longer be talking about colonialism, but there is a new form of colonialism and other issues that we need to lay hands on. And for me, the Bretton Woods institutions were set up for the betterment of United States of America and some Western European countries, not for dependencies. And in spite of all the talk about we living in a global world, we need to look at some of these to constantly remind ourselves about what can be discussed on the basis of dialogue that can lead to changes to get a better deal. But the leadership in Africa is largely not talking about all those, because they are stealing money from their respective countries and keeping them in the West, and worried about what will happen to all that if they speak up, that there can be changes that can be beneficial to allow Africans to pursue the goals of SDGs. Terrorism, I've spoken about that, is part of external dynamics. I don't want to go into the question of how even some of those terrorists came into being in terms of those who founded them originally. And then illicit financial flows aided by corruption. I think at a point, a UN study that Thabo Mbeki, former president of South Africa, led, was talking about billions of outflow by way of illicit financial flows, that the receiving countries are only talking about corruption in Africa, but are benefiting from the proceeds of corruption and keeping them comfortably with themselves and doing nothing about it. Next slide, please. Liwa. Well, I just tried to put some of these out there, looked at some of the indices that are available, and isolated the 3 countries that we are dealing with. And you can probably see some of that against the next set of discussions as to how those countries are ranking. You know, South Africa perhaps ranks by far better than Cape Verde and Nigeria on these indices. But all these, the whole of Africa is very, very low in this respect. Next slide, please. Of course, I threw these also on in terms of the Human Development Index value, as well as life expectancy for the countries. Next slide, please. I'm unable to see what's on the top of this. But the scores of the countries and the the rank is also visible. Cape Verde is I'm unable to control, to push up and down, but okay, fine. Let's go to the next slide. Now, we could be looking at the effects of the failure on the pillars. We have the pillars, and actually Nigeria purportedly has a task force on the pillars, but nothing is coming out of all these task forces, including even the one that was supposed to address corruption in compliance with UN, in compliance with the what do you call it? The UN agreement that was signed, but there hasn't been much showing in this. The gross, the per capita income is nothing to write home about. And when you look at the problem of inequalities, it even gets much, much worse. You do have Nigerians with 1, 2, 3 private jets, especially those who are preaching that we should go get our paradise when we get to God, but they are living it up on earth, quite a good number of them in Nigeria with private jets. When you factor all that in, you probably see that the pillars are there. There is the talk about the pillars. Policies are being announced, but not being implemented. And of course, conflicts continue to make many things difficult in terms of development, in terms of what do you call it, external investment, foreign direct investments, and of course, internal displacements. From all these problems that I've spoken about, you have close to 3 million internally displaced Nigerians here and there, and multiple forms of crises. Next slide, please. Well, Nigeria could benefit from the situational quadruple nexus. Situational quadruple nexus as an expression brings together the situational foundations and the quadruple nexus, that is the double quadruple, to the terminology that I coined, situational quadruple nexus, which is different from which is an expansion of the OSA and ECA relationship on the quadruple nexus that only focused on the pillars, but stressing the need that the pillars will not implement themselves. So we must look at the situational foundation, the environment, the overarching issues on which the quadruple nexus is resting. That makes it difficult for us. And like I said earlier on, as policymakers in our respective countries, these are not problems that we can solve immediately. To get leadership, to rectify leadership deficit is not something, but to pretend that there isn't a problem there is worse. But to recognize that there is a problem and start to address those problems is very, very crucial and important. The same thing, external dynamics. There's very little small countries like Nigeria can do, even though Nigeria is the biggest in terms of population and the economy for Africa. there is very little that it can do in the face of the possibilities of the dictates of the external environment. You can be talking about sovereignty and guarding your sovereignty as African leaders pretend that they are doing. But how can you be guarding your sovereignty when you are begging for food for your people? What is sovereignty if it is just decoration, but not to deliver on the needs of the people? Freedom from want and freedom from fear for Nigerians is key to achieving true development and peace. So there is the need for economic security, food security, health security, environmental, personal, community, and political security. Human security should be foremost in our focus, and knowing fully well that national security is a major part of the tendency is to say, oh, there is peace, but there is peace in the graveyard also. What you call them, the reggae singers pointed out long ago. Then we need to strengthen institutional frameworks for early warning signals, escalation, response, and preparedness capacity. Part of institutional needs would also be to strengthen civil society, non-governmental organizations, to address concerns to the government, not to behave like when the Westerners went to Mobutu Sese Seko and said, we are not going to give you aid support if you don't have political parties. One single party is unacceptable to the West. And Mobutu said, okay, that's no problem. I'll do my best. When next you come, we will have parties. And so he called his son-in-law, he called his nephew, he called several people around him, formed parties, and each one of them had a party. By the time the Westerners came back, you had 37 parties, all saying we are political parties. Yes, but we need to go beyond just claiming to have civil society organizations and really having them effectively operating and standing up for the rights, the fundamental rights of people, not limited, because that's something that you find with the West. The West emphasizes in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, political and civil rights. You cannot go to court that you don't have employment. You cannot challenge your government effectively that there is no food on the table. But yes, you can say that they should allow you to vote. And once you can vote, then the problem, you can go home to sleep hungry. No, we can have civil society entities. There are some of them in Nigeria who are fighting the government at every point and going to court on corruption and not making it easy for the government to, as it is in some African countries, you dare not even talk about it in some African countries, but here, yes, but they are not able to make a major dent in terms of dealing with the problem of leadership deficit and corruption. If you hear the billions that are being stolen and kept in the various papers that were exposed by journalists, and in some countries, prime ministers were forced to resign. In Finland, in my country, nobody has gone to jail on either the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers, or even the more recent Pandora Papers. It's just business as usual. So if we don't address all these things, yes, the UN agencies can be worried that they will be PNG'd, they will be declared persona non grata, so they can keep quiet and enjoy their dinner as the leadership continues the way it wants. If we don't address these issues, then we will be deceiving ourselves, deceiving the people we are pretending that we are serving if we are not moving forward. I don't know how time is. I lost so that we can have some discussion, because we fixed everything for 1.5 hours so that we can have discussion. And I want to repeat that the discussion is not to aim at questions for me, but for people to contribute. What have they been doing in terms of policies to implement the nexus, whether it's the triple nexus or the quadruple. The quadruple is a new thing that Office of the Special Advisor on Africa and the Economic Commission for Africa are trying to push in place. But the triple nexus has been around since about 2016, when we started talking about new way of working. But even if it is the triple nexus, none of them can you carry out without talking about the very, very difficult and impossible situational foundation within which we are trying to break down those silos. The leadership, the governance issues, the external dynamics, Dr. Harikana spent a lot of her time trying to talk about the problem of just one country for a number of countries in Africa. But she forgot that she was being paid by the African Union. And so she was fired, and that's it. So we need to no longer continue to pretend that everything is fine. Just break down the silos, and then SDGs will be achieved. I will pause here, and yeah, many thanks. I lost S there. Many thanks. So we will take contributions from everybody. I would be happier if you can indicate that you have been learning from the modules. And if you have questions, you can raise your hand. Liwa is available to recognize contributions.
Yes, thank you very much, Prof, for this presentation on Nigeria as a case study. So as Prof mentioned, now it's time for questions, but also it's not really questions, but also for you to share your own experiences. You know that we have participants coming from different backgrounds, different institutions, private sector, public sector. So I think it will be also useful and for everybody to learn from each of our others. So I see the first hand is Susu Gados. I don't know. I don't see the name. It's the Gmail. So the floor will be giving to Susu Gados, and then also after that, Mr. Eviano Silva. So please.
Oui, monsieur le professeur.
Sorry, when you take the floor, please present yourself and also raise the issue that you want to talk about. Thank you.
Yes, please go ahead. Introduce yourself. Hello, you have been recognized. Go ahead by introducing yourself and then make your contribution. You don't have to speak in English. You can speak in the language you are comfortable with, French or Portuguese. We have translation, interpretation, sorry. We have interpretation on. Just indicate which language you want to use under the interpretation section.
S'il vous plaît,
Oui.
je pense que la parole m'a été donnée.
Oui.
Bon, je suis Dossé.
Floor. My name is Dose Sosuga. I'm the executive director of an NGO in Togo. I'd like to firstly thank the professor for his intervention and for discussing external dynamics that affect peace within our respective countries. What is certain is that when there is no peace, you cannot talk about development. Regarding peace in our countries, what should we do? Of course, you have the responsibility of nations. However, what happens at the level of families? We also need to introduce education of children on the notion of peace. And education has an important value. The culture of peace is extremely important because without peace, there is no development. I propose that based on Africa's structure since colonization right to date, you have divisions that enable the enemy to penetrate and to try to create disorder and instability or insecurity so that we do not have peace for development. So we need reforms, institutional reforms, and at the level of each institution and each nation, you have to have units that promote peace. From there, the society will now embrace the notion of peace, the importance of peace for development. And by applying this, SDGs will be better understood at national level before we think of interference from external forces. To create peace, we often say that the criterion of poverty is an indicator that we need to reduce so that everybody has something to eat, everybody is satisfied. So Africa's digitalization should be a driver to fight against corruption. That is very normal. Let us combat corruption. And when everybody believes that nobody is stealing money for their own interests, then they will have more confidence and there'll be more African solidarity that existed pre-independence time. That solidarity will reemerge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Liwa, can we take the next comment? And you are free to react to whatever you have learned over time, or to what I said, or to what one of you, Dose Susuga, has just said, or anything else that you want to bring up that is relevant. Thank you very much. Eviano Silva.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Professor. I don't know if you can hear me well.
I can hear you very well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I'm very glad to finally be part of this. Thank you for the presentation. I have a few comments. Well, in terms, I was planning to pose the question, but then because I entered a bit late for the session. But my kind of comment and question is more or less in what we are. This is something new for me, but I'm finding it very interesting and very how can I say? I am, first of all, my name, as you said, Eviano Silva. I'm currently working for the UN UNDP office in Bissau. Mostly in the environmental support for the communities project that need to face this climate change issues. So, my previous work was with UNHCR in the humanitarian area, also for the support of the refugees we have in the country. Frankly speaking, till now, so what I understand of this course, and I tend to give more how do you say it, more responsibility for the public servant, or let's say you can name it institution, government, or the state, because I believe they have more powers to catalyze the changes that we need. You see, as the civil society organization, NGOs, or even UN agencies, somehow wanting to make the change still depends on the government side and collaboration to perform all these pillars of the nexus that we are talking about. Even if we are talking about peace or humanitarian actions, so on, all these. So my point is, my personal experience doesn't allow me to say I am doing enough. So to support or to help people, I mean the population itself, because you know the characteristic of our countries, talking about Guinea-Bissau, you see a lot of differences between the capital and the rest of the country, where the poverty resides itself. You see, so it's very difficult to reach to those areas, population, and support the what is needed in terms of the development and so on. So it's a tricky situation, and I don't find ourselves. I don't think UN for more than 3 decades, 4 decades in the country have managed to not real changes or real development itself. So I don't know how it's possible to bring on board, or you see the instability also that we see in the society, in the government. You know, a country is ruled for 4 years by a party that wins the election, but in fact, sometimes they don't reach the term of their mandate. So this is the problem of peace. Is a problem of I mean good how do you say government? Okay. Good governance. So it's really crucial for me to have in place people in the right places, government side, to help for the achievement of these SD agendas, even UN or African to 2060 agenda. With the corruption in the middle of all of this, as Professor also talked about, it's I find it really difficult. I don't know what in Professor's experience, what do you think can be done as we are trying to follow this new leadership thinking mind? What can be helpful in terms of changing in the prosecution of this agendas thing? For the external factors, you see, while the professor was speaking, I was seeing West African countries use franc CFA currency, but about 2 years ago, we started hearing rumors of changing this currency because of the, I don't know, I don't want to mention it, but from franc CFA to ECO, new West African currency. But so far, there have not been any advance. You know, because this is the kind of thing that I may say that it's because of the external dynamics that are preventing these advances. So African leaders, our leaders, are not doing enough in order to move forward. And finally, one last thing I want to say is that I see the first 10 years of this AU agenda, talking about things that need to be done for this. It was about, I think, 2013 to 2023 to achieve this. What about those countries like Guinea-Bissau? I know it's far beyond to reach those goals. What is there that can be like, for if Nigeria is in an advanced stage, what can be shared or can be helpful for the countries that remains behind as experience to move forward? If professor can advise, we can take notes and then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much. Thank you very much, Ediano, for these issues raised and also the questions. So for the next speakers, please be concise. We want to give the opportunity to everyone to speak. So if you could be concise in asking the question and also sharing the issues with the participants. So Prof, do you want to react on some of the issues raised before we move on?
I think we can move on and add other questions, because amongst or other comments, because I'm hoping that even amongst the participants, there's a lot of experience, as you pointed out earlier on, that they should address some of these very important issues that are being raised. I spent almost 5 years in Guinea-Bissau, so I working for the United Nations, UNOBIS. So I understand the issues that are being raised with respect to special interests and how it is different in Bissau itself. And when you go far into the hinterland, some of the places that I went on my website, you probably will find the photograph using the donkey as the mode of transportation. But okay, we can talk about all these. I can make some comments at the very end but I would want to encourage participants to dialogue among themselves in coming up with suggestions on how we can go forward in achieving the SDGs. As I pointed out, if we can achieve the SDGs at the optimal 100% level, we'll be talking about paradise on earth or utmost freedom. But I know that it's unrealistic. I know that there are several problems, but we should be striving to move forward in spite of those constraints. So is there anybody having the next question?
Yes, thank you. I will give the floor to Bruno Quere, followed by Felisberto Moreira.
Merci bien, professeur, pour oui, merci bien pour la parole.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I thank the professor for your presentation. I just have a few small questions which I would like to ask you, but of course, all of the other participants could also answer my questions. I would welcome that. My first question, in the class materials which you sent to us, I saw that we moved from the triple nexus to the quadruple nexus. I wanted to ask if we could go back a little bit and explain a bit further about why we moved from the triple nexus to the quadruple nexus. I didn't fully understand why we transitioned from the triple nexus to the quadruple nexus. My second question, I wanted to ask you, might it be possible to effectively apply the quadruple nexus to the humanitarian principles of neutrality and impartiality? Of course, we have peace and security as one of the pillars, humanitarian and human rights as well. So could we implement the peace and security pillar without going against international humanitarian law in terms of neutrality and impartiality? How can we effectively implement the quadruple nexus without violating the international humanitarian law principles? My third question is with respect to external dynamics. Professor, you mentioned these colonial histories of different African countries to explain the failure of implementing the pillars of the nexus. So I wanted to ask you about your opinion. What do you propose specifically on the issue of colonialism? Of course, we need to think about the issue of colonialism if we want to create the conditions for effectively implementing the nexus. So these are my questions. And maybe one last question. I think that Nigeria has launched initiatives on Sani Abacha. I wanted to know, what is the state of this initiative? What has been recovered? And what has been recovered with respect to the assets of Sani Abacha? Thank you.
So the floor is given now to Mr. Ismail Munyamu. Please, you have the floor.
All right, thank you so much, moderator. I take this opportunity to thank everyone, our tutors, and then the professor. I think I'm among the few people, or if not the only person from the East African part of the East Africa. Well, to me, what's really becoming a benchmark is the fact that we are having a lot of chronicity in the situation of quadruple in the situational foundation factors, you talk about governance, you talk about resources, you talk about the external dynamics and the institutions. But then my suggestion goes not only to Professor, but all of us on the call. Where do we see the participation of the young people in all this? Because if you look at all the four situational foundational factors, these are mostly being driven by people who you can't put in the age bracket of young people. And it has been a status quo from way times of independence up to the current times. Why can't we really benchmark on the numbers of the young people? Right now, we are counting over 65% of the African population being, below 25 years of age. Why can't we give it a try? Let's say in governance, I would try to build the capacity of these young people and trust them with leadership, because they really gain a lot of, I don't want to call it respect, but they have a lot of cooperation within themselves as young people. So why can't we leverage on that? Because it will at least boost the institutions as well. And then I think they would as well have a lot of vigor in trying to influence the external dynamics. So thank you so much. I think that was my submission.
So thank you very much. So, Prof, would you like to react to some of the issues and also try to respond to some of the questions before we move on? At some point, we need to take some questions from the chat also, and then also we have another hand raised for the next session of questions. Thanks.
Okay, these have been very, very interesting questions. Now, I pointed out that the issue of solving the institutional foundations, they are not easy, and they are not things that we can get done by just a snap of the fingers. Eviano raised that problem and asking what would I suggest can be done in terms of changing some of these. He spoke about the CFR. I think still having very, very strong reactions in the different countries on some of these problems. Analyze, to start with, what is the nature of the problem of your country? And when you understand that, then we can start talking about how do we go forward and address these. I do know that many of the leadership in West Africa who had tried to talk about the need to do away with CFR had been killed, starting with Silvano Olympio of Togo. And a number of, perhaps the only person who escaped, and if he really escaped, was Sekou Touré. But even with him, he was deadlocked in terms of the situation in the country. So it's not an easy problem. It's not one that I can, with the wave of the hand. I wrote something on the CFA and the ECHO when it was being touted as the solution is finally here. It's on my website. I don't even remember the details of it, but we'll be glad to share it on our platform, at least the WhatsApp platform that we have. Then the question of special interest. What I mean by special interest, the geographical situation. At a point, it was being said that leaders focus on where they are going to get votes from. And if the votes are going to be influenced more from the city, then don't expect the rural areas to be represented. I think it's more complex than that, even though that could be part of the problem, but it's more complex because those who are in control in the several countries consider their own interests first before going on to the general interest. In terms of countries like Guinea-Bissau lagging behind, we can only keep trying to see how to deal with the leadership deficit in Guinea-Bissau itself. Guinea-Bissau people are wonderful people, but you have a leadership that since independence has never gotten it right. That has to be addressed before we start thinking at the larger level of the international system. Bruno had raised the question of our moving from triple nexus to the quadruple nexus. That was very much handled in the module, and in actual fact, humanitarian was part of the original triple nexus, HDP, humanitarian development and peace, which came online from the end of the World Summit, the World Summit in Turkey. So it is possible to implement, because when we talk about humanitarian, we are limiting our orientation to just the question of providing aid at the end of a crisis, whether natural crisis or man-made crisis. No, humanitarian includes also building the resilience of people, having them prepared for any eventuality, and their coping capacities that have been lost over time is also part of humanitarianism, and the need to pay a lot of attention to that. Perhaps, as pointed out in the module, people have been talking about triple nexus. I have used the one that is popular. In some situations, you find peace, development, human rights. Without talking about humanitarian, in some situations, it is peace, which is constant almost all the time, and development also, and humanitarian. But having the four rounded up together and being conscious of protecting the rights, I mean, the principles that you enunciated, because when I was working on the quadruple nexus for the East, I did find some humanitarian OCHA in not being very strongly forthcoming, but I don't think it has, it constrains the principles, especially since we have been dealing with that under the triple nexus. On the issue of colonialism, it's a complex problem. There had been several discussions in the past. There were those who were actually pushing for reparations for several things that had been done to Africa in building Europe and America. There were those who were talking about the need for reparations for slavery, for colonization. But for me, at the end of the day, even if you put all that money into Africa today, you're going to find out that people are going to steal them and take them back to Europe and America as investments and waiting to get returns from there. The question raised about Abacha's money, to be honest with you, the Nigerian government claimed that they are collecting a lot of money from Abacha, but the current president actually told us that Abacha was not a thief. When people were saying that he's a thief, because he was also a part of the Abacha scheme under the Petroleum Trust Fund that he led at the time, and nobody talks about all that and whatever. But we are receiving money back from Europe from this thief that had died, and eventually nobody is rendering account today. Some of the European countries started setting up NGOs that are going to be monitoring how the monies are being spent and all the rest of it. But it's important to note that, yes, committees are set up, issues are put on the table, and this government, the current government, came to power with the people believing that he was going to fight corruption. He was saying there was the need for change. If Nigeria doesn't kill corruption, corruption will kill Nigeria, was his campaign in 2014. But he has been quiet as people around him are being documented as stealing at large. But okay, I must not forget that my consultancy is with the United Nations, and Madam Albright once told Akashi during the fighting in the Balkans that international civil servants must always remember who pays their salary. And my country is also one of those who pay to the UN. So we can take, Liwa, we can take additional questions.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
Prof.
I'm sorry. Ismail Munyamu spoke about the needs to involve youth. Oh, I certainly, because the reality of Africa is one of youth population. But I would like to advise African youth that nobody gives up power. You have to fight. Nobody will hand over power to African youth. Women have been fighting and struggling to be part of the equation all over the world. So the African youth must also put in the energy into, yes, we can do it. And even in the advanced countries, Obama came from nowhere and was able to make it. It wasn't just by sitting on his butt and expecting that some older guys would just hand over to him. He contested against McCain and co. That wasn't the case. It's a question of organizing and seeking change and fighting for change. That's the only way by which the youths are going to be able to get into power. But I must also immediately caution that from the experience in my country, the youths here are not saints either. We've had a 45-year-old that was in the Senate. We have 40-something-year-olds that are sitting as governors in some of our states. But there is nowhere that you can point to and say, oh, because a 45-year-old is ruling so-so state, everything is working perfect there, and we can all support that. So there might be an impression that once you say youths, okay, the problem is solved. No, or like women are saying, once you say a woman, the problem is solved. Of course, on the pandemic, women did better. That has been documented from New Zealand to.
We don't hear you, Professor.
Oh, I said on the pandemic, women have been did. Oh, okay. Let me yield.
Yeah.
Let me yield. Liwa, if you can hear me.
Yes, Professor, we can hear you perfectly. Maybe our friend from I think Tanzania, Joseph, has some issues. So we can hear the prof properly. Now, thank you very much. I would like to remind all of us that we still have 10 minutes, so I would like to take this opportunity also to take more questions from the chat and give the opportunity for the three participants that raised their hands. So briefly from the chat, we have some questions. I think that some of them were already addressed in the discussion. One is about how we can apply the quadruple nexus in the context of fragile countries, and also taking into consideration the justice of the winners. So if someone who is winning the election, so he will apply sanctions and about on the losers. And then the other one is about how we can also enforce the application of laws to fight corruption. So these are the two questions that we have from the chat. So I would like to give the floor to first Mr. Felisberto. I think he raised his hand earlier. Sorry, I did not see that. And then also after that we'll have Oliver, and then last one our friend Joseph from Tanzania. So thank you. Please be brief in asking the questions. We have few minutes left for this event. Thank you very much. Felisberto.
Bom dia ou boa tarde a todos e a todas. Eu queria, antes de mais, agradecer.
Afternoon to all. Babarthenian for his brilliant presentation and for the invitation for me to be here to learn about this extremely important matter, particularly with respect to our continent. The prof referred to the importance of the civil society organizations in systematizing government actions, in implementing the NEXUS, and therefore in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. We know that one of the main challenges that African civil society organizations face has to do with freedom. Often, they are unable to talk about the creation of civil society organizations
Please, Felisberto, go ahead and ask your question.
and the difficulty in monitoring government actions, particularly with respect to preparation of reports. In view of our situation in the continent, what would you recommend? Thank you.
Okay, Oliver, you have the floor.
Oui, bonjour. La parole est bien à moi.
Oui, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. Do I have the floor? Yes, you do. Please go ahead. Can you hear me? I want to make sure that it is me who has the floor. I have the floor. Kindly confirm. Yes, you do have the floor, sir. I from Chad. When I followed the course and the course materials, as well as listened to the reactions, I note that the implementation of the triple or quadruple nexus would be a long-term solution to development, but the challenge lies in the power of governance. How would we be in a position to talk about a nexus if at the government level you do not have the requisite conditions, and if governments do not understand the principles behind the quadruple nexus? This is my question. I think that the training we are receiving should be given to policymakers too, so that they are aware of the quadruple nexus and its significance. So that is my concern. I connected to the meeting late and I apologize. And for the next meetings, I will ensure that I will be there on time and ask more questions. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Please go ahead, Joseph.
Okay, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Joseph from Tanzania. Hello.
Yes, Joseph, go ahead. We can hear you properly.
Hello.
We can hear you, Joseph. Continue.
Okay. Sorry. My name is Joseph from Tanzania. I first want to thank you, Professor Badejo, for the nice presentation. To my side, it's not a question at all, but just to cement on what you said, especially on the importance of peace for the development in our countries, especially for us in African countries and the world in general. In fact, peace and development, we can say there are two sides of the same coin, because you cannot achieve development without having peace in our countries. Peace, which may also be as a result of having a good leadership, good governance, democracy, will accelerate investments in our countries, effective utilization of our resources. We improve our social, infrastructures and whatever in our countries. So having peace in our countries, we will be able to mobilize investors from different parties and come to invest in our countries, and hence bring us social development in our countries. In that regard, I can say promotion of peace and security should be given a top priority in the world for achieving our sustainable development goals. Because if there is a war in a country, we will be concentrating on fighting each other, or fighting from one part to the other, instead of concentrating in development works. So just to cement on the importance of peace as a top priority for the development of our countries. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph. So, Prof, I would like to give you the floor. We are, I think, above, I mean, we already passed 10:30 New York time. So if you can react quickly on these issues raised. And,
Yes.
and after that, we need to conclude. I'm really sorry for the other participants that raised their hands, but they will have the opportunity during the next two sessions. We'll have another session next Monday, which will be talking about the case of Cape Verde, where we have the OSA's USG. She will come and present her experience, and then also on 21st. We'll have another live session which will discuss the case of South Africa. So you will still have plenty of time to ask questions and share your experiences. So with this, Prof, you have the floor. Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate the question on that said that we need to apply the laws on corruption. I've written a little bit on corruption and will easily note that, yes, the laws have always been there. And I told you as during my speaking that the United Nations even became concerned, and there was a convention that was set up to teleguide countries all over the world on addressing the issue of corruption. There were pressures on our different countries. In my country, so two institutions were set up for economic and financial crimes, and another one to deal with civil servants, you know, to investigate outside of the police. But all these, okay, you can say whether there are some dents, but the attitude is still very strong on the ground. They're not being implemented. Of course, Abacha is popular, but it's much more than Abacha in terms of, so those who are in power are not implementing, although, as I also pointed out, a number of NGOs are fighting very strongly on these issues. The question by Felix Berto, I would say that we need to empower CSOs more, civil society organizations, and some of them are doing very good job in Nigeria in trying to press for accountability. On corruption, a lot of effort can be done today with technology that can show that you are a thief and you are a thief and you are a thief, even if the government is not going to put you in jail. But even bringing it out that it's you are buying a private jet not because you invested or you brought new ideas into the world that has attracted money, like when you're talking about the Jeff Bezos and the other one of Microsoft, Bill Gates and whatever, but it is just stealing out of what we have collectively. Of course, there is no doubt that the concerns that we are talking about will get to policymakers, but are they going to implement? I didn't have the time to talk about politics. The politics is nothing other than interests. Of course, some of my political scientist colleagues will differ from me, but it is interest. And if it is not in the interests of policymakers to address these issues, we will just be talking and they will be playing with UN agency heads in their country, in their respective countries, and they will be saying we are implementing this project and that project and all the rest of it and whatever. We need to put a lot of effort ourselves as people into seeking change, genuine change in our respective countries. I can stop that. I appreciate Joseph Mwasota trying to add to the question of peace and development are two sides of the same coin. We will add other to make it a four-sided coin in this respect, if it is possible, and that is human rights. You can't have peace if you are not dealing with human rights, and you cannot have development if you are not building the people into to resilience on humanitarian issues if and when they crop up, and they will continue to crop up. Now we will say that nothing is natural, it's all man-made. That's not true. In my own perspective, it's not true to say that everything is man-made. We can see the other planets today. We are still far from them, but we see boiling up of this and that, people who are knowledgeable are bringing storms and all the rest of it. Not every storm we can put at the interference of human beings. There are some things that are natural, but people have learned how to cope over time, but of governance, and we need to address all these in a rounded manner and not treat them as silos, but try to build further on the interconnectedness of these, and in order to ensure a growth and development which will necessarily aid peace, as peace also aids that. And when you have growth and development and things are easier, you are not going to be after people wanting to clamp them into jail for wanting to get their rights, or abandoning them when they face floods and earthquakes and other things, in terms of being effective. I will stop there. We've gone over the time, Liwa, and I thank you for your assistance also. We must recognize that, and must thank the interpreters who have made it easy for us as Africans to hear ourselves that we use, and of course my colleagues and Anthony, who made it possible for us to even use the Zoom seamlessly. Thank you very, very much, Liwa, on behalf of all.
Thank you, Prof. Again, thank you everyone for participating in this first session. I would like to encourage you also to be there for the next session, which will, as I said again, will be focusing on presenting Cape Verde as a case study. And then we have the Under Secretary General of the Office of Special Advisor on Africa. She will be with us, and she will present her experience in implementing the NEXUS in Cape Verde. So please be there. We'll be using the same connection details as today, but we will remind you, and then we'll send an email, and the tutors here, they will send all the information to connect. So please be there. And also I would like to thank all the interpreters and the technicians that made this possible. So with this, I would like to thank you all and have a good day. And the meeting is finished. Thank you.
Merci, Margot.